But first of all, I want to thank Sinn Féin and the other signatories of the motion, and I want to say that we agree with everything that is in their motion, and thank them for bringing it forward. And in fact, it's only just become apparent to me that the amendments we put in were purely additions. They weren't meant to, and we never delete their motion. So I just want to make that clear. That's been added in by the Bills Office. We sent in additions with a couple of changes, but nothing substantial. They were all additions to what was in, because we agree with everything in the main motion. I just want to make that clear. And hopefully although the idea was that there shouldn't be a choice between the two, and the Bills Office have done it that way, and I don't really understand why. Anyway, I'll set that aside, because the more important thing is the message that gets across to the government on this. And look, Minister, you're going to have to revisit this. I'm just telling you now, you're going to have to revisit it. Arbitrary time periods or tables of compensation linked to time periods are offensive. And they completely fail to take into account the reality of coerced, forced separation of mothers from children. Okay? Though the trauma, the suffering, the impact, the lifelong consequences, the varying consequences, which are unique to every single case, cannot be, and there should be no attempt, it is offensive to try and link them to arbitrary time periods in an institution, or to a table linked to time periods with amounts of money linked to that table. Just think about it, Minister. It's shocking, okay? And you're going to have to revisit it. And I cannot believe that survivors, and certainly any survivor I've talked to, and as someone who myself was born in a mother and baby home, where I don't even know how long I was in. 2 mother and baby homes, in fact, from what I understand, how long I was in them, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know. But the impact could be horrendous. If you were 1 day, it could be somewhat lesser if you were 6 months, depending on the outcome. But in every case, the primal wound of children being separated from their mothers and mothers being separated from the children is a crime that was committed by the church and state against mothers and children, tens and tens of thousands of them. So to create arbitrary thresholds that you reach where the state considers you worthy of redress is absolutely offensive. Now, I know you didn't mean to be offensive, Minister, but the problem is the state and the church, this whole sorry saga, is about the crimes of a church of state against mothers and children, but then trying to cover their back, trying to limit the damage. And then you end up compounding the hurt, the insult, the abuse and the trauma that were perpetrated against mothers and children, and re-traumatising the victims. It's obnoxious. I know you didn't mean to be obnoxious, but that is the net result. And it compounds what was done with the report, where the testimonies of the survivors were essentially relegated to being relatively unimportant. Okay? Whether it was intended or it was just gross mistake, I don't know, but it was wrong. And one of the things we've added into our motion is to say that report must be fully repudiated. Fully repudiated in terms of its conclusions. Some of the stuff that was in that report was offensive, Minister. Right? I'm just telling you it was offensive. There's no point in saying it wasn't, because it was. And some of what's in this scheme is offensive. I don't believe it was deliberate, but I do believe it smacks of the state covering itself, trying to limit things instead of trying to do right by the survivors and the victims of this whole horrible scandal. okay? And we have to walk in lockstep with the people who are at the centre of this. The mothers and the children and the survivors, we have to walk in lockstep with them if we're going to get this right, and this has not done it. So I ask you to review it, and to review it in consultation with the survivors. The other thing we've added in is about if the church institutions do not, and the pharmaceutical companies do not, pay their fair share, and they have a lot of assets in terms of funding redress, they have to be forced to do it. Right? They have to be forced to do it. And we should be saying that absolutely clearly. Their assets will be expropriated if they do not do it. I mean, for God's sake, I don't know what they're doing running our hospitals and schools anymore, half these institutions. But the idea that we're going to ask them nicely, they have to be told, and if they're not going to do it, they have to be forced. I mean, there's other individual details I won't bother. They're in the amendments that we've put, but the point has already been made by Deputy Kearns and other people that what you're saying about those who are not included in this scheme, that they will have in the tracing bill and so on, guaranteed access to all their identity records and birth certs, it's just not true, is what people who've looked at it closely, and as I see it, it is not true, right? So we need to address that. I mean, the other changes we've put in, I've only a few more seconds, is just to say sometimes it's forcible separation. In fact, it's always forcible, but the way in which it's forced can be coercion or force. It can be unlawful technically or lawful technically, but it's all wrong, right? It's all wrong. And to create a hierarchy and distinctions that don't understand that human reality of it is wrong, and you need to revisit it, Minister.